Alright, welcome to another video. My name's Hananya and I create writer related content, and in this video I want to go over how you can kick those writing mistakes and habits that you might have been doing as a writer, and I will be sharing some of my personal advice on how to approach these things.
You can't say you didn't see this coming. Finally got some inspiration to write again.
So if you've not watched my previous video on what writing mistakes I have made in the past and what you should be avoiding, I will leave it up in the cards so that you can go watch that first. I will try and go over all of these things kind of in the same order as I did on my last video. If I don't, then I apologize. Mixing up your tenses. So this is definitely something that I struggled with. You can watch that in my video. One of the ways that you can kick that out of the door and actually write the perfect tenses for your book is practice. Now I know that that sounds like lame advice, but that is how I am doing it. I have practiced and I have just been writing and I kept writing, and you just kind of have to keep going. If you feel like you're switching tenses all the time, either try and kind of be like, oh, I'm switching again. Go back, change it, continue. Don't spend too much time focusing on this, but try and just practice your writing. And I know that that sounds very lame, I know. But just continue, and practice makes perfect. If you continue writing and you continue writing in different tenses, at some point you will nail one of the tenses or even all of them. But yeah, tenses are hard anyway. So if you find yourself struggling, just don't let it discourage you. Just keep practicing, keep moving on. Just try your hardest and just keep writing. You will get better with time, and the only way that you can improve is if you practice. It's the same with any sport. You only get better if you practice. So treat your writing kind of as a muscle and work it. Just work it out, and that's how you improve. I can probably insert this answer into every one of these tips because practice makes perfect. As a writer, you can probably never perfectly deliver a manuscript to an editor because otherwise there wouldn't be any editors, but practice does help. Practice, keep training that muscle, and you will improve. For starting with cliches, just try not to. So one of the biggest ones is waking up your character at the start of your book, or the alarm clock goes off and that's how you're starting your book. That is one of the cliches. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying try and see if that is really necessary for your story. Another big one that I've caught myself doing as well is when you have your character look into the mirror and describe the way they look. You don't usually look into the mirror and be like, oh, I have purple hair and blue eyes and I have this like skin that is like colored like you don't. No, you don't, you know. So I definitely have done that, and in some cases, you know, you can put that in and it does work, but just try and catch yourself on these and see if it's necessary, and see if maybe you can just do it a different way that is even more interesting. Switching projects every few thousand words is one of the biggest ones that I had to deal with when I was younger. I would switch because I was not motivated, I was not inspired, I was excited about this other story, I just wanted to write that because I had inspiration for that story. So what I do now is I write down the story idea. I allow myself to sit with the story idea, see if I still think about it a couple days later. If I do, I write down everything that has crossed my mind for this project so far and then move on. I try and not go back to that project unless I need something to work on that is different from the books I'm working on currently, and that's when I allow myself to work on it. I don't allow myself to just switch projects anymore. I try and focus on the project I'm working on. I usually do have two so that I can switch, not because I'm not motivated, but because I just like working on multiple things. This might change in the future. In the future, I might focus on one book at a time. We will see how it goes. But try and not let yourself get distracted by other story ideas. Do write your story ideas down because you want to keep them for future reference, because once you do finish your first draft or your book in general, you want to be able to move on to something else. Or if you're waiting for your editor, or if you're waiting for someone to look it over with your beta readers or whatever your stage is at, you want to be able to work on something else. Some people just want to take a break. That is also fine. You are more than deserving of a break if you finished writing your drafts. So do with that what you will. So one of the things that has kept me is finding that perfect name for someone, or being like, oh, but I have this perfect word and I want to find it. Don't get stuck on trying to find the perfect word or perfect name for your characters. Now, I know that you want to find that perfect name. I've been there. I definitely have spent hours trying to find perfect name. Try not to. Try and either insert a name that you know you don't like, but just insert it. What I do is in my work in progress books, especially first drafts, I either put whatever I'm trying to find in brackets and then capital letters so that it stands out, or I will put a color on it if it's not clear enough, or I will put insert name, literally like say insert name in capitals, or if I can't find a perfect name for a specific character, I would describe that character. So I would say if I have, for example, a chauffeur, I would be chauffeur. And then that would be where I just replace, like mass replace that once I do find a name for that person. I have definitely done that many times now because I can get really drawn into finding the perfect name for hours, and you shouldn't. Just move on. Just write kind of what you're going for, or write insert name, write male lead, or MC is one that I see a lot as well. If, you know, you are still doubting the name, or just say name. Something like that, and then move on. Same with trying to name certain things or certain places or details that you know you're gonna have to insert. Just put some filler text and then come back to it at some point. I also have this whenever I am writing a scene and I don't know how to finish the scene or move to the next one, but I know what the next one is gonna be. I write down, make sure I finish a scene, move on. Try to not let your brain decide what you're writing. Just continue writing. Just kind of insert something that you know, okay, I need to find this at some point. If I do it now, I'm gonna spend hours working on that instead of writing, because you wanna just continue writing. Something that kind of ties into that you wanna continue writing part is don't just write when you have inspiration, just continue writing. As I said, if you're stuck on a certain scene, insert kind of what you're going for in that scene and then move on to the next one. You can always come back to it later and read over what you wrote for that scene and kind of say, okay, I wrote this for that scene. Can I already write this? Do I have a better idea of how to go about this? And if not, you can always just go back once you finish a story, because you might not even like that scene by the time you've finished your story and feel like you might have to rewrite it. So don't try and spend too much time on different scenes. If you're getting stuck, just try and move on, because at the end of the day, you might not even use that scene, or you might cut out that scene. If it is a really important scene, you might eventually have to write it, but you could skip that little part for now. Don't do this with everything. You do have to write some scenes, because otherwise that wouldn't be a book. But if you're getting really stuck and frustrated, leave something and then just move on, because if you're getting stuck and frustrated, you don't want to come back to that story and you're just gonna not finish it. Now we're gonna touch on the feeling guilty part. I can tell you to not feel guilty, but that is not gonna stop you from feeling guilty now, is it? We both know that's not how it works. So what I'm gonna try and tell you is reserve some time for your writing and then write. If you're feeling guilty for not writing, it's okay to not write every single day. If you can figure out kind of a routine for yourself and build a routine that you're gonna stick with, so try and see, okay, I'm gonna write every other day, or I'm gonna write on the weekends. Try and reserve that time for your writing, and then don't do anything else in that reserved time. Don't say like, oh, but I have to, no, you don't have to do that other thing. This is the time you reserved for your writing. So don't make an excuse for not writing, just do it. Now, if you're feeling guilty for not doing all of your other things when you are writing, try and set a timer. Say, I will write for 30 minutes and then I will do 30 minutes of other things. Try and break it up so that you do the writing, but you also do the other things. So some method that works is you can do 30 minutes of writing time and then spend 30 minutes doing chores or doing your laundry, hanging up your laundry, folding your laundry, doing the dishes, like stuff like that. Break it up into sections and allow yourself to do both. For grammar and punctuation and how to improve that struggle, one of the things that you can use is a lot of the word processing softwares out there have a built-in kind of grammar and spelling check, which is great. It's not always perfect, so make sure you do always send your book to an editor once you're done with it. Don't do it with your first draft. Make sure you go through it a couple times. But at some point, your manuscripts should probably see an editor because even the spelling and grammar checks are not perfect. Especially when it comes to punctuation, some of the style things are very specific and I have no idea. Some people have studied for this, so don't worry about it too much. At some point, an editor is gonna look at it. Now, the better your novel is when you're writing it and the better your grammar, spelling, punctuation is, the easier it's gonna be for other people reading your book. Especially when it comes to the beta reading phase and all of that. But it is difficult. So some of the tools that I use is the spelling and grammar checks that I have in my softwares, but also I have Grammarly and I'm sure there's plenty other things out there. I know that there's some other one that people use and it's supposedly really good, but I can't remember the name. If I figured out the name, I will insert it here somewhere. So basically for punctuation and grammar and all of that kind of stuff, don't worry about it too much. Do try, obviously. Just don't let it discourage you from writing that book. I am super dyslexic, but I'm still writing books. Am I perfect in grammar and spelling? No, far from it. Have I been trying to teach myself the grammar and spelling necessary since I was young? Yes, because I was called stupid and I'm not stupid, just to clarify that. I am definitely not stupid and neither are you if you're not perfect at spelling, grammar, or punctuation. It's just a very specific skill and you can learn a lot of it online. So if you do want to improve that, you know, you can for sure, but don't let it discourage you from actually writing the book that you want to write and continue writing the book because at the end of the day, none of us are perfect, and the fact that you're trying is already a very big step, so you should continue. As for doing things that are not writing related, they might be related in a way that it helps you kind of be inspired. But creating playlists for music, unless you're gonna actually write to that music, it's not gonna help you. For me, it puts me in the mood, so it does help me in a way and it makes me think about my story a lot when I'm listening to those songs, but is it really that productive? I mean, I would argue yes, but a lot of people will probably say, you've just spent 4 hours on not writing. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but this was necessary. Those book covers that I'm never gonna use were totally necessary. So I don't really have a lot of advice on this. All I can say is try and not get caught up in all the other things that, you know, you probably want to do at some point or that might help you, or get them out of the way first and then write your novel. Just don't let it distract you from your actual writing time. Info dumping. Now, info dumping is definitely something that I struggle with, and I guess the advice is sprinkle it in, but that is like very easy for me to say. It's not very easy to actually do, at least in my experience. Some people might be like, what are you talking about? This is like, I don't struggle with this. Well, good for you. I guess sprinkling in information can go through many different routes, and you don't want to just info dump and then move onto the story. If it's like a background of someone's story, you can insert it in bits. Like, don't just info dump all of their character history. Just kind of go like, oh yeah. You can insert, I guess, a way of, oh, back then we had this. And then like chapters later, you can say, oh yeah, when this and this. I don't know. I don't know how to do this because I am struggling with this, but I guess that is kind of how people do it. Is it? If you have a really good solution to this, let me know in the comments because I need it. Naming my characters in general is an issue, but also naming them all the same. I have so many books that my character's name is Joe, Jake. I have a lot of Tylers, I have a lot of Michaels. Yeah. Now, it's not necessarily that big of an issue because none of them are published, but if I do want to publish these books, I obviously can't have all of them be the same name. They're not the same character, but I used to be like, oh, well, I like this name, I'm just gonna use it everywhere. Try not to do that. Now, don't try and spend a lot of time on naming your characters, but also don't name all of them the same. Try and differentiate. Try and see if there's names that you're like, oh, this is not too bad, I can go with that. Do that, you know. You can always change the name later, but yeah, don't name them all the same because that's definitely something that I did. One of the things is also don't try and name all of your characters with the same first letters, I guess. I have a couple of that, but yeah, it's probably better to not do that so that your readers cannot get too confused on which character is which. If they're very similar, then they might get confused. Descriptions. Well, I don't think I have a lot of advice for you on how to approach this because I struggle with writing descriptions. One of the tips that I've heard before is when you walk into a room, describe the room. And that's kind of how people have done it. Or if you personally, right, as you as a person, walk into a room, what is the first thing you notice? And just describe that. Don't describe every single detail in the room, but try and describe like the main visuals that like kind of catch your eye first and then write that down. And that is kind of how I guess you can do it. I have not really implemented that strategy yet because description is just really difficult for me, but I guess that's a way that you can do it. If you have tried that method or if you are really good at description, let me know what some of the examples you write are because I might be able to learn a little bit from that. Something that kind of ties into the description is also show versus tell. We've talked about this in my previous video, but show versus tell is one of the more difficult ones. I feel for me, I have a lot of things that just get discussed where I'm like, oh yeah, we're in the kitchen. And then I don't go into detail. Now, some of the ways that people have kind of showed me how to do this is instead of writing they're in the kitchen, be like, oh, there is pots and pans kind of like on the stove and they're bubbling, or there's like a smell of freshly baked bread or something like that, instead of being like, oh yeah, they walk through the kitchen. Because that is apparently boring. You want to kind of show the person that is reading your book that they are in a kitchen without saying you're in a kitchen. So apparently that's a way to do it. I'm not good at doing that, but that is kind of how I'm going to edit through my book and kind of see what am I actually saying instead of showing, and how could I show that this is happening instead of me saying they are walking through a kitchen. How can I kind of invoke the same without actually saying it? So it kind of ties into my description part because I feel like a lot of descriptions and these kind of things kind of tie in for me. So yeah. As for the overwriter in me, I tend to not just write less. I tend to just write and then cut later. That is kind of what I would say. Just continue writing. Don't be like, oh, this might be too much. It's okay. We are writing a first draft. And if you're not writing a first draft and you still feel like you're overwriting, this is what editing is for, right? Editing is so that you can make this story better. And it's easier to edit something that's there, although I don't necessarily always agree with that because I find editing very difficult because what do I cut out and what do I keep? And I guess anything that isn't necessarily propelling the story forward or is necessary to your story should not be there. Although I find that very harsh advice because obviously killing your darlings is very, very difficult, and I don't like cutting out anything from my books because I'm like, but this is a cute scene and I want to keep it. Apparently like a 200,000 word book is not the standard for the genres I write in, so they should be probably like half of that. Not that my books are 200,000, don't worry. But my current like historical romance novel is 100,000 words already, and I have not even added descriptions, so yeah. As for starting like a routine for your writing, this is probably something that you do want to do. So just block in time blocks, time frames, like all of that, and kind of stick to that. Don't let anyone kind of distract you from that time unless it's like an emergency, you know, then I get it. But try and stick to the times that you set for yourself, because if this is really important for you and you want to do this, then actually do it. If you cannot schedule out like a lot of time for your writing, a lot of people also write books just in like increments of 5-10 minute sprints, you know? There are probably moments where you're waiting for something. You're maybe waiting for the bus, you're waiting at the grocery store, you're waiting for your food to be ready. Something like that, where you have small increments of time where you might pick up your phone and start scrolling on social media. Those moments can be moments where you actually write some of the book that you're trying to write. You don't have to sit down for 3 hours and write all of those 3 hours. You can pick small increments of time where you would normally scroll through your phone and try and write something. You can use like the notes app on your phone, or you could send yourself like text messages and write that book. So you don't really have an excuse to not be writing that book. I'm sorry. Hard truth. I've kind of touched upon this by making a routine and actually setting out time that you're gonna write. Doesn't matter if you're inspired, you're just gonna continue writing. And I have also said that if you're stuck on a scene, move on. But if you find yourself stuck on your scenes a lot and you don't know what's coming next, you don't know what to write, maybe you're more of a plotter and maybe you should try and write out the plot or write out the story beats that you think you're gonna need. So kind of see, okay, where do I want my characters to go and where do I want them to end up? And how am I gonna get there? And kind of write the steps in between and write the steps that your characters will have to take to reach their goals. That is a way that you can maybe figure out the story and help you actually write your story when you're sitting down to write that book. Yeah. I think that might be it for this video. I don't think I have any more tips or tricks that I can share with you to kick these writer mistakes or bad habits that you might have and continue writing that book. I think this is it. Even if you're like, well, this doesn't really help me that much, I already know all of this, then still, thank you for watching this video. I really do appreciate you hanging out with me and listening to me ramble about this. I am just very passionate about story writing, and I just want to share what I've learned so far with everyone out there. And if even 1 or 2 people are like, wow, this really helped me, then I'm happy. So yeah, I definitely don't feel like an expert, and I definitely have so much to learn as a writer myself, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then I hope that you will stick around for my upcoming videos and maybe even leave a like or tell me in the comments that you've enjoyed this video, because that really helps out my channel. So with that, I will wish you a happy day and hopefully see you next time. You can continue this. What is it? Discouraged? Is it discouraged? Is that the word I'm looking for? I feel so awkward recording these videos.